I want to ask a question this morning about hope. What does hope look like? What is it? If you've grown up in the church, hope has this really, to be honest, this really weird, somewhere up here kind of level, hope for, and we're never quite sure how to finish that, but it's some future, I don't know, something that's going to happen, and we're all thinking about this up. I want to talk about hope down here on the ground this morning, and what we're doing as a church family, as individuals in our own faith, in our own life. And I don't have a Bible with me this morning. I just want to tell some stories, and let's start with the concept hope, and you listen to stories, and we'll go from there. How does that sound? I'll let you make your own conclusions at the end of the day. I spent with Nathan. Where'd Nathan go? Oh. I spent a few nights last week with Nathan hanging out at Anita Place, Tent City, and just talking and getting to know people and enjoying the company of a community that really needs support. And so we just hung out and talked and enjoyed hearing about people's lives. I want to tell you a couple of stories from there, and then some things that have happened since. I think it was I don't remember what night it was. It doesn't really matter. But we're hanging out, and this woman comes in. She doesn't live there. She doesn't stay there. But she comes in with her child sometimes and just helps support in different ways. Sometimes that's serving food. Sometimes it's just hanging out. The other piece of that puzzle is this is her community, even though she is in housing now. These are her friends and people that have looked after her over years and stuff like that. And she begins telling her story to us. And 2 minutes in, I realize I've heard this story before. It's been about 2 years now. There was a row of tents on Cliff Avenue, and our first official homeless camp in Maple Ridge. And a friend of mine would go every so often. If I got a beer in him, he would go with me. And so we started at the pub and then moved to Cliff Avenue. And we would just go and chat with people and just talk, sometimes take Timbits or pack of smokes or something like that, and just chat with people and give them a moment of time and listen to needs and stories. And one night we came across this woman who begins telling her story about losing her kids to family services, about losing her work and winding up on Cliff Avenue. And she's in tears, broken, looking for help, looking for work, looking for a place to live, looking for supports. Big, long story about everything that's happened and how she lost her kids and how the family services has mistreated her and all of these pieces that are lined up. And it closes with, is there anything that you can help with? Man, where do you start? How do you respond to that question? How do you even begin to think, well, I'm not an employer, but I'll listen. I'll keep my ear out. I'll, do whatever I can. On Monday night or whatever it is, she walked into the camp and begins telling us this story. And I go, I've heard that story. But the amazing part is she continued over the last 2 years. And she begins telling me everything that's happened in those last 2 years. They moved, Rain City Shelter opened up. She moved in there. She found a sense of stability there. They offered her a job at Rain City Housing, which she is still in and continues to hold. She got housing through the support network that was there that allowed her to find that stability, that allowed her to come back and work for Rain City Housing. She continued to fight to get her kids back. Little by little, all of these pieces came into place. Today, she has one of her kids back. The woman that was her caseworker with Family Services was fired specifically because of how she handled this case. And all of life has changed in the past 2 years. And she's telling me this story, and I say, telling us this story, and I say, you may not remember this, but 2 years ago, you told me the first half of that story. And she goes, oh my goodness, I remember that night. And she begins describing that night and what a small thing that we were there had made this one night out of a few years on the streets changed how her perspective. Not that she started some sort of recovery process because of that night, but that she looked on that night and go, and that guy that was with you, he was hilarious. And she starts going on and on about my friend that was going with me. He had a few beers, and he's really, to be fair, he's really funny when he's had a few. Anyway, and she begins recalling this story, and she goes, that was in my darkest moments. And that night was this glimmer of something better. The last morning we were at Anita Place last week. We got up, we took a walk and got a coffee, and we ran across a guy with a cart and a bunch of bags. And he's like, hey, this is funny. He's like, you guys know where all the tents are? And he tells us later, you guys look like you would know where all the tents were. And so we point him in the right direction. We go get coffee. We come back. And he's sort of roaming around, and he comes and he gets a chair, and he comes and just sits next to us and starts talking. There is some sort of need in this environment just to talk, and we didn't go out of our way. We didn't push anything. We just sat, and people would walk by, and they would stop and chat and begin telling stories. And he sits down and he starts telling the story. He's like, I got here this morning and I set up my tent, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should stand up or walk around or go find something to do or what to do. And I just sat down in this moment of pure hopelessness of what's next? What do I do? Where do I go? How does this end? And then I started talking to you guys, and it really brightened the day, and everyone here has been so welcoming, and it's amazing. I've been on the streets for 3 months, and there are some terrible, terrible people out there. And this has been amazing. Just being able to sit down and chat and talk has been amazing. And he begins telling us his story. He says, I was an addict for many, many years. I've been clean for 7. Went through a terrible injury. I was prescribed some intensive painkillers from the doctor, and somehow was able to make it through clean. And it was so, so hard. Relationships have been just utterly destroyed through addiction over the years. And those aren't coming back in the last 7. And now I get here and I'm just decimated by where I'm at. And this camp, this place has given me some sort of light. And he says before we go, he says, today, I said no 4 times. He sat down in that tent not knowing what he was doing, where he was going, what was coming next. And the look in his eyes when he said that was, I can't tell you how difficult that was, but I said no 4 times today. Hope has a different meaning to different people. Sometimes in our life of privilege, in our life of nobody's life is easy. I think we can all acknowledge that. But we get chances. We get to continue to have hope. And it's at some level, this is in a totally different realm from here to here. What kind of hope is? That he says, I said no today 4 times. Okay, I've got one more for you. Because Jesus came to save the Christians too. Last week, after church, a gentleman goes to the camp to kind of see what was going on. He's kind of been a terrible person. He has led the charge, the anti-homelessness charge. He has organized protests against different locations for permanent housing to be placed. He has said some horrific things. Like, it would shock you. If I shared the name, many of you would go, oh. Okay, so last week, get this, after church, he goes to the camp, and he runs into Nathan, and he begins talking. Now he knows Nathan, has a history with the Sands family, and so they begin talking. And something clicked. I don't know. Something clicked. That afternoon, he called me, because Nathan said, oh, I'm here, open door, blah, blah, blah. He calls me, and he begins to talk and tell me that he thinks he's having to rethink this homelessness situation. And he says, something has to be done. And he's moved from something has to be done to stop these people in our community to something has to be done for these people. And it's hard to even get a word in. He's asking for advice or information or something, but it's hard to even slow him down to input anything because he's going on and on with ideas. And I'm like, okay, but lots of Christians get involved and it causes lots of problems because they expect this and this and we've got lots of research that shows you can't do things that way and it has to be done differently. And here's other things that are going on in our community. Here's some really cool stuff. But he is going and going. This morning, he called me at 8 a.m. and he wants to talk some more. He says, okay, today I'm talking to the head of our church. I know people, we put so much money into other things. There's money around, there's resources around, and he's referencing the article that was in the paper. He's like, Nathan's right. We have so many resources. We have the resources. We just need the passion to actually do something. And I'm kind of a pit bull. So I'm going to the head of our church today, and I'm going to talk to him about this. And I'd like you guys to come to our next men's ministry breakfast and come, just share some stories and tell us your ideas. And if you've got ideas on how to make this help these people, I can get you resources. Just let's figure this out together. This is the harshest, most hateful person you've seen on Facebook in the last year is talking about garnering resources to help two guys that had a weird idea to stay at a homeless camp so that we can support people. So in my broader church community, this is what hope looks like. To see actual change in our churches and the way we think about the world and the way we think about people. He hired a guy for his business out of the camp to come and do work. And he's like, and if you know other guys there that have skills, carpentry or whatever, I'm looking for somebody to do this and this. And we've got a guy that we're going to get housing. How much money do you need? And I was like, well, it's kind of a big number. He's like, yeah, but what is it? Hope has a weird way of coming out in different places. And a lot of times we talk about renewal or we talk about hope in some esoteric, high theology kind of situation. But the reality is our role, our call, our faith should be lived out in the real world on what does hope look like on the ground, in our own lives, in the lives of those around us.